For years, my home had been more than just four walls and a roof. It was my sanctuary. It was where I drank my morning coffee on the porch, where laughter echoed during family dinners, and where I felt truly at peace. But there was one constant disturbance that threatened to shatter that peace. Karen, the head of the neighborhood HOA. From the moment I moved in, Karen seemed determined to remind me that this community was her kingdom. She scrutinized everything, whether my grass was an inch too long, whether my trash bins were placed on the curb at the correct time, even the color of my mailbox. At first, I thought she was just an overzealous neighbor, someone who took her HOA duties a little too seriously. I tried to be polite, even when her notes arrived in my mailbox like clockwork, warning me of violations that seemed absurd. Neighbors often joked about her being a tyrant, but behind the laughter, there was a nervous edge. People feared crossing her. She had a way of making lives miserable, of pushing until people caved to her demands. I, however, wasn't so easy to bend. Still, I never imagined her bitterness could grow into something darker. I believe that at worst, she'd find me or drag me to an HOA meeting for humiliation. I didn't realize then that her desire for control would go far beyond rules, straight into destruction. The warnings started small, almost laughable. Anonymous letters appeared in my mailbox, typed in bold capital letters. "You are in violation. Fix it or pay." Of course, I knew exactly who wrote them. Karen had a signature way of making even paper feel hostile. She wanted to make sure I never forgot who was in charge. Then came the threats during HOA meetings. Karen would sit at the head of the long table, adjusting her glasses before singling me out in front of everyone. "If certain residents can't follow the rules," she'd say, eyes drilling into me, "perhaps they don't belong in this community." People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one dared defend me. Challenging Karen was like throwing yourself into a storm. You knew you'd lose. It wasn't just me she targeted, but I became her favorite. She claimed my fence was too high, my porch light too bright, even my dog too loud. Each week it was something new. Neighbors whispered that Karen had an agenda. Some said she wanted my property for her daughter, who was looking to move in. Others believed she simply hated anyone she couldn't control. I shrugged it off, convincing myself that her pettiness could only go so far. After all, it was just an HOA, annoying, yes, but powerless beyond fines and complaints. Still, behind her polished smile, I sensed something sharper, a malice that seemed to grow every time I stood my ground. The night it happened still burns in my memory. I had just settled into bed, my dog curled at my feet, when a faint crackling sound stirred me awake. At first, I thought it was rain tapping against the window, but then I smelled it, the sharp, suffocating stench of smoke. My chest tightened as I bolted upright. Flames were already crawling up the living room curtains, their orange glow painting the walls like some terrible sunrise. Panic surged through me. I shouted for my dog, scooping him into my arms as the heat pressed against my skin. The smoke thickened, clawing at my throat, making each breath a desperate fight. I stumbled through the hallway, every second louder with the roar of fire. By the time I flung the front door open, the blaze had swallowed half the house. Neighbors rushed from their homes in night clothes, their faces pale with horror. Someone dialed 911, while others tried helplessly with garden hoses. But it was useless. The fire was too fast, too hungry. Standing barefoot on the lawn, clutching my trembling dog, I could only watch my memories dissolve into ashes. The photos, the furniture, every corner that had held pieces of my life, all gone in a storm of fire. And then I saw her. Across the street, arms folded, Karen stood among the crowd. Her lips curled into what she thought was a hidden smile. In that moment, I knew this wasn't an accident. By morning, all that remained of my home was a blackened skeleton. The fire had eaten through everything. Walls collapsed, roof caved in, windows melted to warped glass. I stood at the edge of the ruins with soot clinging to my skin, the smell of smoke still woven into my hair. Firefighters worked quietly, their faces grim. One of them approached me and shook his head. "This wasn't accidental," he said. His tone carried the weight of certainty. Investigators arrived soon after, combing through the wreckage. They found traces of gasoline near the back porch, soaked deep into the charred wood. My stomach dropped. This wasn't some freak electrical short. It was deliberate. Someone had set my house on fire. I told them everything. The letters, the threats, the endless harassment. I spoke Karen's name out loud. Watching the investigators jot it down. Neighbors were hesitant at first, but a few whispered about her late-night walks, her constant fixation on my property. And yet, Karen moved through the neighborhood as if nothing had happened. I saw her the next day, walking her dog, head held high, greeting people with that smug, rehearsed smile. She didn't flinch when she passed the ruins of my home. If anything, she looked proud, as if my destruction were proof of her power. The days after the fire felt like a blur of paperwork, interviews, and sleepless nights. I stayed with a friend across town. Though I barely slept, my mind replaying the crackle of flames and Karen's smirk across the street. My lawyer urged me to stay calm, to gather everything I could, emails, letters, witness statements. If we push, he said, we'll expose her. A week later, the call came. My heart pounded as the investigator's voice echoed through the line. We've made an arrest, he said. My hands trembled as I gripped the phone tighter. It's your HOA president, Karen. Witnesses had placed her near my backyard that night, carrying a red gas can. And then came the final piece, security footage from a neighbor's door camera. There she was, Karen herself, sneaking across the shadows of my property just minutes before the flames erupted. The image of her so casually striding with that gas can make my blood boil. It wasn't paranoia. It had been her all along. Every warning, every threat, every smug smile had led to this. For the first time since the fire, I felt a spark of hope. Justice wasn't just a distant dream. It was finally within reach. Karen had always believed she was untouchable, above the rules she forced on everyone else. But now, she was the one facing judgment, and I was ready to watch her empire of control crumble. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and nerves. I walked in with my lawyer by my side, my palms damp, my chest tight. It had only been a week since the fire reduced my home to ashes, and yet here I was, seeking justice in a place where truth and lies would collide. When I entered the courtroom, my eyes locked instantly on her. Karen sat at the defendant's table in a pressed navy blazer, her hair perfectly styled, her posture tall and commanding, as if she were presiding over another HOA meeting. She glanced at me with a glare sharp enough to cut, her lips tightening into that familiar expression of superiority. For a second, it felt like we were back in a neighborhood, me standing alone while she ruled. But this time, the power wasn't hers. A judge sat above us. A jury waited to listen, and evidence hung heavy in the air. Karen whispered something to her attorney, then straightened, giving me a look of disdain, as though I were the intruder in her courtroom. My stomach twisted, but I lifted my head higher. I wasn't the one on trial. She was. As the judge called the session to order, I felt a strange mix of fear and strength. Karen could try to intimidate me with stares and smirks, but here, her words would finally face the weight of proof, and I was ready for her lies to unravel. The trial unfolded like a slow burn, each piece of evidence adding fuel to the fire of truth. The prosecutor began with the letters, those typed, threatening notes I had received in my mailbox. Karen shifted uncomfortably as the jury read the words aloud, the venom in them undeniable. Then came the witnesses. Neighbors testified about her obsession with my property, her constant threats at HOA meetings, and how she had openly declared I didn't belong in the community. But the real blow came with the video. The lights dimmed, and on the screen appeared the grainy footage from my neighbor's security camera. The timestamp matched the night of the fire. There she was, Karen, sneaking across the edge of my yard, clutching a gas can. Her face was unmistakable, caught in the glow of a street lamp. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Karen's attorney stammered, trying to argue it was a setup, but the evidence was too strong. The investigator followed with his report, explaining how gasoline residue was found near the porch and how the burn patterns confirmed intentional ignition. I watched Karen's confidence drain with every word. The smug arrogance she carried into the courtroom melted into pale silence. For once, she couldn't control the narrative, couldn't twist the rules to her favor. The truth was laid bare for all to see. Her power, her lies, her cruelty, all consumed by the very flame she had set. The verdict came swiftly. The jury found Karen guilty of arson, destruction of property, and reckless endangerment. As the judge read the sentence, Karen's face was blank, her once sharp eyes staring forward without expression. She was ordered to serve time in prison and pay restitution. The same woman who once strutted through the neighborhood like a queen now stood in handcuffs, her empire of intimidation reduced to nothing. I sat quietly, my hands clasped together, a wave of emotions flooding me. Relief, grief, and something close to triumph. Justice didn't rebuild my house, but gave me something I had lost the night of the fire: peace of mind. Neighbors approached me afterward, some apologizing for staying silent, others admitting they were too afraid of Karen to speak up sooner. I didn't hold it against them. Fear had been her greatest weapon, and now that weapon was gone. Rebuilding wasn't easy. Every brick laid on my new foundation reminded me of what I had lost, but also of what I had survived. My home rose again, not as a place haunted by Karen's shadow, but as a symbol of resilience. Karen had walked into my courtroom with arrogance, convinced she would win, but she walked out in chains. And I walked out free, free to start over, free to breathe without fear, free to rise from the ashes she left behind.